Welcome to Sound of the Gjallarhorn, where faith, tradition, and philosophy meet the modern world. Here is your host, Mark Greer.
Welcome to the show, everyone, and hail the gods and goddesses. Here we are on another episode of Sound of the Gjallarhorn on Northern Runes Radio. Today we're going to discuss an issue that I think is very important, and it was actually a friend of mine who brought it to my attention and said, you should do a show on this. You should think about doing something that kind of gets down to the bare bones of it, to the basic concept of why we celebrate the Odinist religion or the Asatru religion. Why do we celebrate this? What benefit does it have in our lives? And I think that that's a very important question. I think it's important for us to understand it and understand why we celebrate this religion and how it can benefit us personally and as a community. Because if a religion doesn't benefit you, if a religion serves no purpose in your life, if it's just something that you use to sort of make you feel better than others or more intelligent or something like that, then if it serves no beneficial purposes towards your spirituality or to the connection of your community, then it really has no use. It has no purpose in our lives. And we need to have things like that to have meaning in our lives. And fortunately for us, I believe strongly that Odinism and Asatru does have benefits. It does have meaning, and we have to understand it in order to gain that meaning, to grasp it, in order to have that as a part of our lives. And so when we look to the gods and goddesses, when we look to the lore, when we look to meditation or bloats or any of the spiritual activities we engage in within this religion, we gain much benefit from it. And in order to understand those benefits, in order to grasp them and use them in our lives, I've categorized the main four that I believe are the most important. The things that, if you're looking for something out there that is to give you meaning for your existence or for your life, then these four would be, to me myself, are the pivotal aspects of this religion, of this way of life, that can benefit you, that can bring forth the things that people need in their lives. And that's connection to others, that's being a good person, that's understanding the world around them, that's our engagement with the social sphere and the world around us, and everything that we are a part of. These aspects of it, I feel, are pivotal. And these are morality, philosophy, freedom, and identity. So we're going to go into the first one. That's morality. Now, morality is a big issue because when people look to a religion, they always look at, for guidance in their lives. What leads me to be a good person? What leads me to want to be moral and ethical and be decent to those around me? And there's no concept that you should do that out of fear. There's no idea that you should do it because if you don't, you're going to be cast into some fiery damnation or something like that. I mean, there are ideas of punishment within the heathen religions. I mean, you look at Tartarus of the Greeks, and you look at the underworld of the Egyptians, and you look at some of the belief system of these ancient religions, and ours is no different. We had Niflhel, and Niflhel was a realm of the damned, just like the Greek Tartarus. And it's basically, for those who just live their lives without remorse, without caring about the world around them, people who are just monsters, who, we know who they are. We know them and know them in our lives and in the world around us. Those who there's no compensation for what they do. There's no backing out of what they do, and there's no making up for some of the crimes that they've done, and they don't want to make up for the crimes that they've made up. And I think that's really what that's about. Now, some people might say, well, that's a Christian concept. The idea of punishment in the afterlife is a Christian concept, but that's not true. I mean, there are several heathen belief systems that support this idea, and it's supported in our lore. And whether or not that that may have come later, we don't know. But the thing is that the notion of punishment for specific crimes is not within any sort of monotheistic belief system, believe it or not. A lot of people think that is part of Christianity, that is part of the Judeo-Christian belief system, but it's actually not, because those belief systems are built upon the notion of grace. And so they don't have punishment for crimes. They don't have to make amends. And we see, like in older religions, people make amends they make sacrifices to the gods. They make amends for the things that they do wrong socially. The idea of making amends is what permeated these ancient cultures. And so it was a very deep and respected ideal of their morality. And so when you hear the notions of atonement and things like that, which atonement was a big deal in the ancient Vedic religions, and we know that from the Rig Veda and other sources. And so I think that there's a sort of an addiction to some people to sort of promote a secularist heathen belief system, and that's fine if they want to do that, but there's nothing in our lore that supports this idea. There's nothing in the histories or the sagas that supports the idea that our ancestors were not religious people. Because you're sort of rebelling against Christianity, or you're rebelling against your experiences in the church or whatever, that you somehow feel that our religion shouldn't be a religion, that it should be something else. It should sort of be an anti-religion. And I don't believe that at all. I believe that it is a religion, and it has always been a religion, and it should be treated as such. And the great thing I love to use in debating secularist heathens is to show the Rig Veda, because you read the Rig Veda, and these are the hymns of the Vedic Hindus, the Vedic Aryans, who, they used very strong pious language, and there's a lot of language in there that mimics a lot of stuff that you see in the Bible, and because they copied a lot of that stuff. They looked in it and used whatever they liked and all that. But morality is a big issue, and it's the idea of being a moral person has to have consequences, because there are people out there who don't care about morality, and it doesn't matter if they practice a religion or not. They don't care about morality. They will step on you. They will kill you. They will harm you and your family, your children, your wives, whatever. They're just evil people. And so that idea is something that needs to be recognized, and so that you see that there is, some sort of notion of karma or urlag within our religion that allows for the balance of those individuals. They create an imbalance with the bad things that they do. Look at Loki, for instance. A lot of people think that the things when Loki is asked to make up for his crimes and the things that he does, that it's just showing his mischievous nature. But it's not. He's a saboteur. He's a saboteur of the gods, and he is a representative of chaos. And because of that, each time he's made to bring balance. He's made to make up for what he does. And so when you understand the notion of atonement, the only way that he can stay within the God's graces when he gets caught doing these things is to make amends. So it's not like, because people say, well, it's because he's good natured. No, that's the way it is. You have to make amends. You have to fix it. You have to make right the wrongs you have done. And if he didn't, he would have been banished. You don't want to make up for these things, so you got to go. And his plots and schemes would not have been furthered. He would not have been allowed to continue sabotaging the gods, so he had to make amends. He had to make up for the things that he did in order to continue his stay in Asgard. So what are our morals? What do we believe in? What are the things that we stand for? Now, I believe most people follow the 9 virtues. Some follow the 9 noble virtues. People have different variances on them. In my research, I've used these 9 virtues for a long time, and they may vary from what other people use, but this is what I believe, and I believe that this is a part of our ancestral way. These 9 virtues are honor, honesty, wisdom, generosity, independence, courage, loyalty, piety, and kindness. Now, these are things that make a person connected to their society. They make a person, allows them to deal with the world around them, both the good and the bad. You have honor, and you have to be honest, and you have to have wisdom in your affairs. You have to be generous to those around you. You have to show independence. You have to be courageous. You have to be loyal. You have to have piety to the gods, and you have to be kind. Now that's pretty straightforward. It's not any kind of bizarre taboos. It's not any kind of strange commandments that tells you must bow and submit and obey, because laws and especially religious laws, are made so that society works. That's the purpose behind it. That's why a lot of the religious laws that have developed out of monotheist religions are really kind of a perversion of what the very notion of law is. Because it takes away from the idea that laws are made just to keep the peace, to keep people connected to each other, to keep communities strong. And they don't do that. When you're saying you must submit and you must obey and you must put yourself in the hands of this deity or this church or this priesthood in order for you to be considered righteous. And that has caused a lot of damage, a lot of hate, a lot of division within people and attacks and bloodshed. And we've seen it. We see it today. We see it on the news all the time. And so we have morality. We have a moral system that's more geared towards that natural connection to one another, to our tangibles, as we spoke in the last episode. It's that idea that we stay connected to our community, we stay connected to one another, and we try to build each other up. And in order to do so, we have to trust one another. We have to use wisdom and help each other out, but at the same time not be slaves to one another. And I mean, there's these aspects of our society that allow us to be successful. We just have to follow them. And I think that the idea, when, as we spoke of in the last episode, if you listened to it, I'm sorry, is that, when we just focus on being good to one another and we focus on the community, the real flesh and blood that's in front of us, and not abstract ideas that do not serve us in any beneficial way, then it all makes sense. It's so simple. It's just the simplest, easiest ideas in the world to follow. And yet a lot of people try to make it so complicated, so hard. Another system of law that we have is what we call the rune law. Now, this is a system of law that we developed, the Norroena Society developed through our research. And this, we started with a core foundation of the idea of using runes as law. And this comes from the Rigstula primarily. There's other sources that make allusions to it, but when they talk about the runes of eternity and runes of earthly life. And these runes were basically, it's believed, it's been interpreted that these represented some sort of religious spiritual law system. So what we did is we took each rune and we looked at the theme of it, and we compared that to ancient codices of law and how these laws worked and how they connected, the theme of them would connect to this specific rune. Then we also used the Havamal, the Sigdrifamal. We made a lot of comparative research into this, and it basically allowed us to develop a legal system, a spiritual law system for us. So we have the very notion of keeping the peace within our communities as an integral part of our religious law. And the thing is when we see in the Lord, we see a lot of prayers and we see a lot of passages where they talk about the gods granting victory. Now, this can easily be interpreted by just meaning victory in war. It could be straightforward, victory in war. But victory in war has a lot of implications to it. And even then, because I believe that what they're talking about is just victory in overall. A lot of times when they talk about the gods grant victory, it means success. Victory is success. And so that means success in your life, power in your life, strength in your life, the ability to move forward and make great things happen for yourself. And this is one of the great notions of our faith. So when we ask the gods for victory, we're asking them for success, not just to be able to vanquish an enemy, but also to be better and to improve our communities. All right, so the next aspect of our faith that I want to go into is philosophy. Now, the idea of philosophy shows that we have a belief in a logical choice, that we have logical views and a relationship with science and philosophy and the material world. We are a nature religion. And being a nature religion means we believe in the natural realm. We do not believe that anything is supernatural, anything is above nature, and everything is subject to the laws of nature. One of the biggest questions I asked myself, and I may have mentioned this before, is if you were to meet a god, a deity, the first thing I would want to know, the very first thing I would want to know is, what is this deity made of? What do they consist of? Because if they are consisting of something, of a force and energy, molecules, atoms, the consisting of these things would make them pluralistic in their own sense. If you're made up of something, right, then that being made up of something means you're a unity of many forces, many little things. We are made up of atoms and molecules and cells and then organs and blood and bone and flesh and all of these different things that make us who we are. But it really is just a unification of many different entities. And that makes us an individual, but we're still pluralistic. We still exist on many different levels. So if a deity is made up of something, if it's made up of smaller things, then that totally means that monotheism cannot be possible. Because the idea that something is singular, that it is a great singularity, is just totally false. And every time, you think back in the ancient times when they were writing this stuff, there were concepts and beliefs in pluralism and the idea, but they didn't know about molecules. They didn't know about germs or cells or bacteria or the many microscopic little creatures that exist in the world, in the universe. They didn't know about these things. And so it was easy to get people to believe that there was this unification, that everything was one, that it was all a part of one great grand scheme. But then as we started breaking things down, you could see that there is no one. There's just many. There's many, many, many. And every time we break it down, we see many, many more. Millions and billions, an infinitesimal amount of cells and molecules and atoms and all these different things that make up the universe and all life within it. So it really detracts from the whole idea of unification, of it all being one. Now, I'm not saying, when I say unification, I'm not talking about that things aren't united, that they're not connected. Of course, everything is connected. It's all one big puzzle. It's all connected. But being connected does not make you one. It does not make you the same. It does not make you identical. And so we don't see any notion of something existing on a singular level where there's only one. And so we have this belief in pluralism, and we have this belief in a universal structure, and we have that when you have this belief that there are many, right, then what happens is you start to break down the very belief of monotheism, the very belief that there can be only one God, because you have to have many of everything. And so if there's many of everything, then there has to be many gods and goddesses. And even in the Bible, they talk about many gods, and he was a god among gods and all this stuff. So, in order to have this relationship, you have to have a belief in many deities. And the biggest part of it, the most important aspect of this is the notion of family, which is the epicenter of our beliefs, the epicenter of it. And the gods are a part of that because they have the divine family. The divine family of the gods and goddesses who have aunts and uncles and children and mothers and fathers. And all of this is a part of the very nature of this religion. And it's so important. It's so pivotal because family is the epicenter of our culture, of our ancestry, of our heritage, of our faith, of everything. And we live in this pop culture world that tells us to reject all of that. Reject all of it. Go have fun. Go have a career. Make something out of yourself that means nothing. When you die, you have no one. You have nothing. You have nothing to continue on your name, on your life, on your family line, and you die nothing. You literally die nothing. And I cannot stress this enough to people of our faith. And you can balk at me and get mad and all that, but it does not make it any less true. And I'm not, hating on people who don't have kids and don't have families and all that stuff, but I'm telling you that this is the most important aspect of our faith, and that aspect is to carry on your line and to carry on your family name and who you are. Because if you do not, then you die nothing. You will be forgotten in no time. You will be an afterthought. And I don't think anybody out there wants that. I don't think any of our listeners want that. I don't think anyone within Odin's great nation wants that. And so that's something that we have to consider. Now, the next part, the next aspect that we're going to look at is the notion of freedom, which is a very, very important ideal, because not only is freedom an important thing to us now in today's age, but freedom is the legacy of the European people. Now, that's not to say that other cultures weren't free or that other cultures didn't have any kind of belief in it, but I'm talking about the liberty movement. The freedom movement was started, motivated, pushed, and maintained by our ancestors for thousands of years. And I can give you some quotes on that. I would like to give you a quote from Boudica's speech to her warriors in AD 61. Just the first paragraph. She says, "You have learned by actual experience how different freedom is from slavery. Hence, although some among you may previously, though through ignorance of which was better, have been deceived by the alluring promises of the Romans, yet now that you have tried both, you have learned how great a mistake you made in preferring an imported despotism to your ancestral mode of life, and you have come to realize how much better is poverty with no master than wealth with slavery." All right, I would like to compare that to the quote from Herodotus, which he says, "A slave's life is all you understand. You know nothing of freedom. For if you did, you would have encouraged us to fight on, not only with our spears, but with everything we have." And then you look at Tacitus, who wrote of the Germans or the Britons in his Agricola, and he talks about the conflicts they had in trying to conquer these peoples. And he was talking about one of the tribes, the Cimbri, and he says their death was no less glorious than their resistance. For when they could not obtain from Marius or the Romans what they requested by an embassy, their liberty and admission into the Vestal priesthood, which indeed could not lawfully be granted, after strangling their infants, they either fell by mutual wounds or hung themselves on trees or the poles of their carriages in ropes made of their own hair. These were a people who were not going to be conquered. These were a people who refused to bow, who were going to be free. And it was something that they demanded, or they would just kill themselves. They would prefer to die than be slaves. And there's something in Boudica's speech that mentions that as well. This is the very essence. Later on, we hear the quote, "Give me liberty or give me death." This was something that they lived by, and they would have died for, and our ancestors would have died for. The founders of some of the great republics of the world and histories would have died for this, for freedom. It was so important to them. And one of the great philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, Montesquieu, actually talked about in one of his books, I think it was called The Spirit of Liberty or Spirit of Freedom. He talks about how the very notion of liberty and freedom came out of the dark forests of Germany. And so this was a very important belief system to our ancestors and to the legacy of our people. All right, so the last aspect is identity, and now this is a big one for a lot of us. It's created a lot of animosity over the years or whatever, but it's an important thing because it takes religion beyond just the idea of a abstract spiritual belief system, which we have said here is something that we should try to avoid. I mean, we know that abstract ideas exist and are part of it, and we know that, but those things must accentuate the tangible. They must enforce it, not have us turn against the tangibles, turn against the things that are flesh and blood, things that are connected to us, our ancestry, our heritage, our families, our communities, our lines. I mean, we should never have anything turn us away from that. So it's more than just a religion. It's a way of life, and it is a celebration of life. It is a celebration of our folk and our heritage, and this is a true designation given to us by nature. And nature is something that is important. And there are scientists out there who try to convince you, just like with the emperor wears no clothes. Or they convince you, your heritage and your ethnicity means nothing, and it's just a few genes here and there, and it's just a little bit of DNA. And they speak in subjective terms while claiming to be objective scientists. And they say it's just a little teeny tiny bit. Now, what does that mean? That's a subjective notation. It means nothing. All right, we share a majority of our DNA with pigs and trees and stuff. I mean, it's not anything that means anything because it's something that we feel in our hearts. It's something that we connect to, on a genetic level and something that we can see with our very eyes. We don't need to be convinced of this. You don't need these so-called experts to tell you it's not there, because they're lying. They have an agenda, and they're full of it. You can see it with your eyes, so don't pay attention to that. And so it's not about like trying to claim superiority or trying to attack someone or persecute someone or harm someone. It's not about that at all. It's about finding your way home. It's about finding your identity and your connection to something that goes beyond you, something larger than yourself. And this is through a hierarchy, a devotional hierarchy that starts with yourself and your family, your children, your wife, your parents, your closest blood relatives, and then extends to your outer community and your folk and your country and all of these different things. And it's all spoken of and all promoted in a spirit of love and connection, because beyond that, then you go to other folk and you go to other nations, and there's just the recognition that you are a part of humanity, that you are a part of the human species, but that you have a devotion, you have a hierarchy of your devotion, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not saying that you hate others. It's just saying that this is something that matters to you, something that's important. And that identity gives us meaning. It gives us a connection. And we see, this celebration of nature. It's a part of your nature. It's a part of who you are. Your skin tone, your eye color, your ethnicity, your heritage. These are all things that are connected to you by nature. And you can hate that all you want to. You can get mad about it. You can say someone's racist or whatever for celebrating those things. But it doesn't make it go away. It doesn't make it stop. And all you can do is either celebrate it or hate yourself for it. And I don't think that anybody should live with hate in their hearts. I don't think that you should live with hatred for others, and I don't think you should live with hatred for yourself. Get over it. Wake up, grow up. It's time to celebrate ourselves and celebrate our accomplishments and celebrate the world that we live in and be a part of it and connected to it. And so that's a big part of it. That's a big part of the belief system that we have. And we ask that anybody who wants to connect to this identity, that we welcome them home. I mean, this is who you are. This is your own backyard. This is something that was stolen from you for many, many years ago. But it's the tenacity of the faith to show that after all this time, it's still here. It's still a part of you, and it's never going away. So those are the four main issues, main aspects of our faith, and that's what we were wanting to go into this week and break down those ideas. And there's many more. There's many more aspects of the religion, but I think in introducing someone to the religion and introducing someone to what we believe in, this is a good start. I mean, these four aspects are a good start for all of us who follow the folkish Odinism or Asatru belief system. The tradition of the week. All right, it's time now for the tradition of the week. And this week we're going to be discussing the need fire. Now, the need fire is an important part of our rituals, our ceremonies, because the need fire actually is the primary, at least mentioned in the lore, method of consecrating things. And the use of fire is connected to the primordial elements, and there are different organizations do different ways of consecration. A lot of people like to use Thor's hammer, and they'll use that in many different ways, and that's totally, completely recorded and understandable, and I use it, and it's something that is very pivotal and very useful in the practice of our faith, is the sign of the hammer and the use of Thor's hammer. But the question arises on a philosophical level is what consecrates the consecrator? How do you consecrate a Thor's hammer? How do you use it to basically make that holy and make that connected to the divine powers or whatever? And really, when you can make a chunk of wood or a chunk of metal and turn it into a hammer, but is it really, what's the difference between that and just a regular piece of wood or metal, and what makes it actually consecrated? And so there is this idea that the primal elements are what the most holy features of our religion, the most holy elements, the most holy aspects of them, because these go back to the Gununga Gap with the fire and the ice and the development of Yggdrasil and all of the different elements that came out of that. And that's the evolution of life itself, the cycle of life, the birth, life, death, and rebirth notion. And so we use the fire, beyond that, not just consecrating Thor's hammers, obviously. I mean, there's a lot of different lore, a lot of different mentionings and citations you can find within the lore of using fire and the methods of the need fire. And just, we don't have time to go into all of them today, but we can discuss a few of them just based on our philosophy and based on some of the research that we've done. Now, the first is the origin of the need fire, which was, the Gununga Gap, and which developed the many elements and the different powers that be. And from that also came the first technology, which was called the Grotty Mill. And the Grotty Mill, you've heard the Grotta song, and there was a greater Grotty Mill, the mill of Heimdall's mothers, the 9 mothers, and they were the fire. The mill was turned by the giantesses, who are the 9 mothers of Heimdall, and Heimdall's father's name is Loder, and Loder's name means the fire producer. So this is a connection that it is believed that the stones turned, sparks started to fly from it, and from this turning and the motion was an inspiration for need fire, which is the use of friction in order to create flame. And the very idea that our ancestors could control fire was a big, big deal. That's why there is a lot of symbolism in the Vedas and in the Eddas about the difference between wildfire, which would be Logi, and controlled fire, which would be Heimdall, or Loki could also be wildfire as well. And it's Loki and Logi are pretty much the same word. Heimdall is controlled fire. Heimdall is the god of the hearth fire. He's also, his name means the home light, the light of the home. Now, his name's often misinterpreted as the light of the worlds or whatever, but the word Heim means light. Not light, I'm sorry. The word Heim means home. And he is the god of the home light, of the hearth fire, the light of the home. And as such, he's identical to Agni of the Hindus, and there's a lot of research that's been put into that. We won't go into all that, but he's definitely the god of the hearth fire, and there's a connection to him through that, and through his 9 mothers and his father Loder. And so there was a lot of lore around the need fire itself, a lot of popular traditions that showed how it was used to cure sickness, how it brought luck to the folk and to animals. Animals would be walked over it to cure sicknesses, or just bring good luck and good producing of milk by cows, or different meats or whatever. And the folk would jump over it, and there was the whole tradition of Jack be nimble, jumping over the candlestick, and all of these different things have this tradition and connection to this need fire, which is a primordial element of our faith. And another important thing is, you can carry it around your area, the sacred area, or around your home during a land taking. It's carried around in our lore by Thjalfi, who uses it to sanctify Gotland, because it's sinking in the evening and rising in the morning, or vice versa. I can't remember right now. But, he sanctifies the area in order to break this curse and make it holy again, and make it where it's, stationary and doesn't sink into the water. And so there is lore, there is definitely a very sacred aspect to it, and that it goes back to the Vedic era as well. In the Vedic text, fire is God. Agni is one of the most powerful gods of the pantheon, and their fire rituals and their fire cults are permeating throughout the Vedas. It's a very important aspect of it, so it would be surprising if it wasn't an aspect of our faith as well, because there's such a strong connection between Odinism or Asatru and Vedic Hinduism. You also have like sacred fires of Europe, like the Vestal Virgins and the Virgins of Bridget in Ireland, and the ones who keep the sacred flame. And this is interesting as well, because there's the notion that the giantesses turn the mill and make the fire. So there's this relationship between women and the kindling of the fire, which is interesting because Jacob Grimm actually noticed in his research of popular traditions that there was a tradition where 9 young girls would turn a spindle that would create this fire. And this would be something that we could use in our ceremonies today if you actually wanted to recreate as closely as you could the original need fire. I mean, I would get, based on some of the popular traditions, you have the younger girls of the tribe or clan or the women come together. If you can get 9 of them, that would be great. And they would turn a spindle. It would basically be a frame. There would be a central pole, and there would be a spindle on top of it in a vertical or a horizontal alignment, and they would spin it like a wheel. And as they spun it, the stake or pole would turn, and it would bore a hardwood into a softwood, and they could use oiled rags and different accelerants in order to get the fire going, and it would create the sparks, and they would kindle the fire. And this would be an important thing. You could use the chanting of the Naldiz rune or different charms or whatever you want to make that a spiritual and powerful experience for you. And it shows this relationship between fire and women, and the notion of that, and Heimdall's mothers, and the development of fire, and just the respect that we have to Heimdall for bringing us fire as the great culture bringer. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. There's a lot of research out there on need fires. There's a lot of stuff out there, so you can look it up through various channels and stuff, or you can ask us. You can look it up, what we're doing on our website, www.norroena.org. You can email us, info@norroena.org, or norroena.society@gmail.com. You can go on our wiki, which is the Norroena Well, or norroenawell.org, NORROENAWELL.org. There's different ways to connect to us. Look up our videos, look at the different things that we do. And we really appreciate everybody being here and listening to the show. And we want to thank you all, and hope you have a really good night. This has been another episode of Sound of the Gjallarhorn on Northern Runes Radio.
You let him grieve who lies captive